So this video dropped in my recommended feed out of nowhere, and I was just as surprised as anybody because so far Gamers Nexus and Linus Tech Tips have largely been very, very friendly. It was really, really weird to see them like get confrontational all of a sudden. But this is one thing Gamers Nexus has always been really good at. They just come in and they're going to call it like it is. And if Newegg is doing something scummy, even though they are like very friendly or maybe even sponsored by them, he's going to call them out. And I find it really, really refreshing. So let's see just a quick rundown of what's going on with Linus and why he's upset about it.
A few days ago, this clip from an LTT lab tour got a lot of attention online.
The difference between us and somebody like Gamers Nexus or Hardware Unboxed is we test new components, new tests every time.
I think they go on to show that this is just not true, that they are not testing new stuff every single time. But it sounds like something he was probably told by one of his supervisors or managers. It sounds like a script almost, like the difference between us and these guys is blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't sound like something they were, I don't think they meant for him to say this publicly in a video that was seen by millions, but whatever.
And then Hardware Unboxed tweeted dissatisfaction with the statement made in that tour. We didn't say anything at all, anywhere. Even though it's not actually true, they don't collect new data and new tests every single time, and it's not always necessary anyway. So
yeah, I do want to be clear. It's really easy to pile on to a guy or his company when one person in that company of like 80 to 100 people says something that wasn't factually accurate. I don't think it's totally fair to hold like Linus's feet to the fire for something that one employee said that maybe was just him misunderstanding or saying something offhanded that shouldn't have been said. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to hold Linus's feet to the fire right up front. Where it gets problematic is if he refuses to do anything about it or address it or correct it or anything like that. That's where you can get in trouble.
So when Linus went on the WAN show, we hadn't gotten involved. Linus responded to Hardware Unboxed on the WAN show and then said the following.
There's a fair number of people that are talking about the whole Trust Me Bro situation, where there were some creators that it seems like you guys are... Look.
Just say it. Everyone knows you're talking about us.
It's pretty clear that not everyone in the creator space handled that super professionally. I don't obviously agree with some of the takes that were out there. I don't think that it's particularly journalistic, for example, to ignore facts, to ignore personal relationships.
It is.
Yeah, he's going to get into why what Linus just said is really, really problematic and is kind of indicative of somebody that I think views themselves as kind of a king in a very special position, because what he just said was these journalists are not being journalistic, which maybe that's debatable. I don't think in this case it is. I think it's just not an issue or not part of the discussion rather. But then to say, and just ignore personal relationships. It's like, dude, that's kind of the point of journalism.
My job to ignore personal relationships.
Yeah.
If LMG is going to make false accusations and wants to try and use personal relationships to gain favor so that we don't cover something we think is not okay, it's not going to work with us. We don't play that game. The first
Yeah, you remember when I said that the problem is not, like, I don't think you should hold Linus's feet to the fire if one of his employees says something bad. Where it gets bad for Linus is when Linus refuses to acknowledge it, refuses to apologize and address it and figure out how they can fix it. Like, I don't think the guy should have his, like, I don't think the guy should be fired necessarily for making that offhanded comment. I don't think he really realized what he was saying was factually wrong when he said it. I think if he knew it was factually wrong, he probably wouldn't have said it. But when he said it, he probably believed it. But it turns out, no, it's wrong. It isn't accurate. They do reuse data. So Linus should have come up and said, yep, that was incorrect. It wasn't fair of us to bash it or be negative about it. We should just do all of that. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Madison thing as well. I've followed Madison for, at this point, like 2 years or however long it's been. I saw her on that initial video she did with Linus, and I followed her streams and everything since then. because she does a lot of like craft stuff, which is really handy if you're into Warhammer or D&D and you make your own minis and stuff. So I followed her a lot, and to hear her come out now all of a sudden and describe her experience at the company is troubling. So we'll touch on that.
From an LTT lab tour caught our attention, but it itself isn't worth commenting on. We have something wider in scope we want to comment on, and it's simply that we believe LTT or LMG is rushing too much to hit arbitrary and largely self-imposed deadlines that are causing frequent and sometimes significant data errors and information errors. And this conflicts with the ramping marketing surrounding accuracy and data-driven objective reviews that they're pushing for from LTT Labs. So we've decided to turn off all YouTube monetization here. We will not be placing a sponsored ad in this video. We were just going to report on serious concerns that we have with LTT and bring some awareness to these critical issues. We've been thinking on this for a few months now. We have a few main points of discussion for today. They span.
And so he proceeds to just tear them a new one as far as their lack of professionalism with removing errors, like consistent issues with methodologies on tests, which you might be like, what's the big deal? If you mistest a GPU, what's the harm? Well, maybe with like a big GPU from NVIDIA, it's not that big of a deal. NVIDIA will be fine. It's still incorrect, but like, it's not like you're hurting a small mom and pop shop. The problem does really come, and it's not defendable or defensible once you get into this future area where this Belay Labs thing comes up, which we'll skip ahead to here in just a second, because I mean the point is made. You can see how much time they're able to dedicate to how many incorrect little bits of data are listed under, like, within the videos when they're reviewing this stuff. It's just indicative of them rushing, because normally these issues are caught and they correct them with asterisks or with pinned comments or edited things in the description that barely anybody sees, but they shouldn't be in the video to begin with if it's running like a really professional operation, you know.
And from raw data that potentially misleads consumers, even if unintentional, accidental, that counts too. And we have some ethical concerns and corporate connections that we want to talk about, including great ethical concerns regarding LTT's inaccurate testing and misrepresentation of a small company's prototype, followed by the auctioning off of that prototype, despite the company wanting it back for other media and not granting permission for the auction. Also,
which I don't know how that's legal. Like, I would think that they'd be able to like sue LTT over that, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's nuance to it. Yeah, we're going to look at the Linus response. Yeah, no, we're not here to just dunk on Linus. I want to figure out what the actual thing is that's going on, what the there is. So we're going to look at that here in just a minute. Well, it's not legal. So like the reason I say that is because I've been sent stuff for like reviews, for example, and it's like a verbal agreement that like, hey, if you don't like it, or after the review or whatever, sometimes it's like if you just want to try it before you decide to review it, or try it before you decide to do an ad read for it. If you don't like it and you just don't want to do the deal, send it back to us. Or in some cases, you'll even do reviews for things and they'll ask for the product back. We haven't done something like that in a very long time. I'm like, no, if you're going to send me something, I'm like, I think it's fair. If I'm going to promote it and I like it enough to promote it, I think it's fair that I keep it. Especially if it's a pair of like glasses or something, you know. But in this case, it sounds like they sent him a product. There was probably like a verbal agreement that, hey, you can send it back because it's a prototype. It's not a finished product. Send it back to us when you're done with the video. And then they screwed up the review because they tested it incorrectly. And then they decided to auction it off, which just seems really scummy. Like, I don't. So yeah, I think it was sent in good faith, and it was probably a verbal agreement where they said, yeah, and then you can send it back to us. But they clearly didn't honor it, which is just a problem.
Issues regarding LMG's recent review of the Ponage mouse, where they failed to notice that there was protective tape over the Teflon feet.
This is bad. this one actually makes me cringe pretty bad.
To knock the friction coefficient of the mouse, followed up by a pseudo correction wherein LMG fails to take full ownership of its mistake and instead blames the product for not handholding them through the process of removing said tape. But we'll start with the simpler stuff and then come back to this.
Oh. So like the equivalent to this would be if I review, like, I can't get specific, but like I'm reviewing a game right now that I, again, can't be specific about. But in the past with game reviews, often you're playing a build of the game that has been created well before launch. So there might be a couple of issues, there might be bugs, there might be things that will be fixed when the game launches, but that you're going to deal with because you're playing an earlier version of the game. Sometimes this is something like, one time years ago, I remember there was a review where it was like, yeah, the FOV by default is set to like 30 degrees. You can't see anything. And so before you start playing, you need to go into the game's save folder in your app data folder that's hidden in Windows, open the INI and change this number from 30 or 40, whatever it was, and change it to whatever FOV you desire. And then when the final game launches, it will default to like 75 or 80, and then you can change it with a slider in the menu that we don't currently have. And I was like, okay, really, really weird and clunky, but okay. As long as it's in the final version of the game, we're good. I'll tweak it this weird, clunky way, but it's not fair for me to like diss the game because I had to go through that roundabout thing during the review process. It like, if I didn't change that and then I spent the whole review talking about how stupid the 30 or 40 degree, whatever I said, FOV was, that wouldn't be fair. That would be stupid because you're like, that's not the game that launched. That's just not it. And with this, they were talking about on the mouse, on the bottom of it, there was still like tape on these little portions and it made it drag weird. And they didn't notice that there was tape on the bottom of the mouse that they needed to remove before using it. And then they spent a bunch of time in the review bashing it for not feeling good when it slid around, which is just dumb. Like it's just dumb. But this is, again, like, it wasn't Linus that did that, but it was one of his employees. And in theory, this shouldn't have happened if more than one or two people were working on the videos that could catch this kind of thing. And then also the way they responded to it was not great because they basically pinned a comment, said, actually, this big complaint we had is not a big deal, but it's their fault for not making it clear to us. You know, it's just, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Marketing is strong, but exiting just entertainment and entering technical data-driven reviews and marketing on the back of that means that there needs to be proper work to back all of that up because people are now putting a different level of faith in the material coming out and the expectations are different. And we know these issues at LTT in terms of the rushing, the pushing employees and staff to hit deadlines despite concerns with the data or the collection of the data. We know that these come from top down, as shown in a recent LTT interview that it conducted with its own employees, where many of them stated concerns with content quality pertaining to restrictive time constraints.
Yeah, this is crazy. Like, they filmed this and put this up on their own channel, and overwhelmingly, the employees are all like, give us more time. We put out too many videos. The crunch is terrible. Help us. Dear God, help.
Less videos.
I wish we could back off the amount and focus on quality for a bit.
More time for projects would be good.
Just allow us more time to work on a video.
We never have time for retrospection. It's always just, that's out. What's the next thing?
Would be nice if the pace was lessened a little bit. Have time to like debrief or look in the rearview mirror at how things went.
I don't love that we have to release so many videos. I don't know.
25 plus videos a week. A week. And like, these aren't quick little like stream highlights or something. These are like huge videos filmed with Red Epic cameras that have high-end audio that mixes with them. Like, these are very, very elaborate projects. And they're pumping out that many. I think it's 80. I don't know. If somebody in chat knows exactly how many people work there now. Last I heard on one of their Waveform, that's MKBHD. Last I heard on their WAN show podcast, I thought it was like somewhere between 80 and 100, but maybe it's up to 120. If you mix in the lab that they just opened, 120, I think. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if it's 120, that's still like just 25 super high production value videos is just crazy. But like this is the problem with this is like the employees are asking for more time, and the only way you get more time is by lowering the total number of projects and videos that go out, which lowers revenue because there's not as much ad revenue, there's not as much sponsored revenue, not as many merch calls, things like that. And so that probably means that they downsize and let some more employees go. And so the whole thing just kind of starts to tumble. And so it's just an example where they've grown working their employees to the bone, and now they're trying to figure out if there's any way out of it, which is rough. I don't know if it's clear, like the types of videos I make and put up on my channels are pretty low effort compared to what Linus does. Everything that they're doing on LTT has a script that has to be written by somebody, proofread, and checked factually with somebody. And then they sit down, they film it on a big set with very expensive cameras. They then have to take all the footage off, transcode it through a server. That server then moves it to another server, and then an editor then edits a draft of it. Then a reviewer then goes through, watches the video through once to make sure there's no editing mistakes, and if there are, they have to send it back to the reviewer to get corrections. And then after that, they insert any extra ads or things that they need to do, and then they get it finalized, rendered at max quality, and then send it off to the YouTube servers. Like, it's very, very elaborate. This is not a situation where you're throwing together a video in an afternoon just casually for the main channel content. Some of their smaller channels and smaller projects, they can probably do that quick. But the big stuff, no, this is like a dozen people or 24 people total touching a project by the time it goes out over the course of like 2, 3, 4 days. So it's very, very elaborate. And so it seems pretty clear that the employees want more time and that there's not enough time for all of this. But beyond rushing stuff and factual inaccuracies and reviews, what else is there? Well, he gets into discussions of ethical concerns and then also conflicts of interest, and then the whole Belay Labs thing, which Linus still apparently refuses to acknowledge was a problem, which we'll get to.
And all of these post-shoot, pre-publishing corrections bring us to the next set of concerns, which is an increasing amount of irresponsible actions and conflicts that we've seen emerging from Linus Tech Tips. So we've been seeing an alarming amount of conflicts from Linus Tech Tips as it relates to their corporate connections, their flow of money, and the potential bias as a result of those things. And we've been looking into this, maybe more of a future video thing, but some of the concerns include how Linus is personally invested $200,000 into Laptop Maker Framework, and yet is also covering their product and their competitors' products. LMG also has a...
Yeah, investing into a company and then like promoting it on your channels, I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem if you're going to then review the competitors' products. That seems very problematic. Even if you say, just full disclosure, I've invested in this other company that also makes laptops, I guess that gets you out of it legally, but still that leaves like a really weird feeling for me. That seems strange. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that if you, if I invested in, like if I had a major stake in, I don't know what would be a good example. Oh, well, maybe just to keep it simple, like I have a huge stake in something like, I don't know, EA that makes Battlefield, but then I'm expected to fairly review Call of Duty. I'm not sure that works. Like, even if I'm really trying to be fair with it, I don't know if I'm like, if I can be, it just doesn't sit right. You know, it doesn't sit right. Something seems off with it.
A cross-branded, again, screwdriver with Noctua, and that's being sold on their store while they're also reviewing Noctua products favorably, even when it's shown to be hitting, by their own data, 100 degrees Celsius, which becomes problematic for brands like Noctua as well, because now it is less clear if the praise is genuine or if it is biased, whether intentional or unintentional. These issues combined with...
And even if the review is factually correct, or even if everything in the review is good, because of the conflict of interest, there's a question there. And with reviewers and things, there shouldn't be a question at all. It's why, like, I've received offers to do reviews or paid reviews. So like if a company comes along and it's like, hey, would you like to review like Starfield, and we'll pay you 15 grand or 20 grand, or like if you're a big guy like Skill Up, they probably are paying him like 50 to 100 grand for one of his reviews. If they come along and they say that, then like if I say, hey, this review is sponsored by the company that made the freaking game I'm reviewing, you probably shouldn't believe it, right? Like that's a conflict of interest. It just doesn't sit right. And so I think like that's why I'll do like sponsored looks at games. If a company wants me to see a game and expose my audience to it, sure, as long as I'm allowed to say whatever I want. That's always the agreement I have with I have my agent make with them. Like I'm down to do a sponsored look. Like Immortals of Avium, for example, they sponsored me to look at the game early back in like May, I think it was. And I was like, as long as I'm allowed to say whatever I want, I will say, like, I'll look at the game and I'll make a video on it, sure. But I'm going to say whatever I want, positive or negative. And if they say, yeah, go for it, then we're good. Because at least they trust in their product enough to be like, yeah, you're going to like what you see. Yeah, it's okay. But a sponsored review, I don't think I'd ever do. Because it's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, can you imagine? Can you imagine being like, oh, there's a new Skill Up review or something, and then you click on it, and it's like, welcome to my review of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, sponsored by Ubisoft. You'd immediately be like, what? It'd be weird. Yeah, it's like the FBI investigating the FBI. Yeah. It's like, what?
High-level corporate connections through the CEO and through the head of labs raise a lot of concerns about conflict, but we won't be getting into them in depth in this video. Instead, we're going to focus on the consequences of irresponsible reporting and bad data and how that influences the purchasing decisions of millions of people. To start with, let's discuss the implicit ethics of knowing a lack of qualifications yet continuing to operate on a certain type of content, or being unwilling to commit the time to do that content properly, especially if you know that there are flaws and shortcomings already and choose to forge ahead. We don't really see any other options here. It is either too rushed to the point of potentially producing harmful information to viewers and to consumers that they then act on, and to manufacturers alike, or the company is unqualified to produce that information. It's really one or the other. This one talks about the ethics and power of a review outlet and therefore its responsibility to do due diligence on a product. On June 24th, LTT published a video about a copper water block made by a small company called Billet Labs, founded just last year. LTT took one of the company's first prototypes to test, valued
A prototype, okay.
in the thousands of dollars for manufacturing, not counting opportunity value. In the video, the LTT team stuck this special 3090 Ti water block on an RTX 4090.
If this wasn't a 3090 Ti, then we don't have another 3090 Ti that we can take apart.
How the hell did we not know what GPU this thing was?
I thought it was a 3090 Ti.
So we just
Bro. How is the audience okay with this? Like, it's specifically made for a 3090 Ti, and they're like, I don't know what this is. Maybe it works on that. Like, what?
casually had a 4090 sitting on the shelf, clearly labeled,
stating that it should work, despite it not being explicitly compatible. The company did not tell LMG that it would be 4090 compatible. They told LMG that they could try to use a 4090, but Billet Labs itself had not tested one as it didn't have a 4090 at the time. Water blocks have very specific tolerances and clearances for components, so any misalignment would cause poor contact to the GPU core. LMG decided to try it and continued with the video despite misrepresenting the product massively by using it on an incompatible device that it literally would not fit properly. LTT's presentation goes down the path of being irresponsible, presenting the product as much more difficult to work with than it would be if used properly. The conclusion...
Yeah, that's really bad. To be like, I tried to use this on a non-compatible thing and now it doesn't work well. Like, what?
like it's a cool product, but it's a bad product.
It looks great.
Yeah, it looks super cool.
Are you just saying it's bad just purely because of the price?
It's bad because it makes absolutely no sense and nobody should buy it. Most of the community is actually really amazing, but there's a vocal minority that looks at something like that and goes, lazy, out of touch, you know, whatever else. No, I'm just really experienced at this.
Oh! You got it.
Crap.
Did you put it in backward?
Get a shot of that. Look at that.
It founds this conclusion on the basis of improper installation. This serves no one. It needlessly harms a small company, and this kind of behavior can kill someone's life work in a heartbeat.
Their life savings they've invested in the company, all this just because one YouTuber decided to make a review and then take tons of shortcuts, not take it seriously. I've said this before, I get really, really freaking anxious when I'm making reviews even for big companies. Probably the one that was most stressful recently was that Gollum review. Gollum, we all agree, is probably the worst game of the year so far. It was horrible in every way. But I got it. I saw they had a little bios of all the devs that worked on it in the review packet that I got. And I see these people are really passionate about Lord of the Rings and they really seem to care about the source material. And then I started playing the game and it's just horrible in every way, shape, and form. And so as I'm writing the review and filming it and making it, and I'm I don't feel good about this. I don't like coming out here and being all of these people that made these games that are horrendous. Yeah, they should be ashamed and blah, blah. I don't like doing that. I would much rather come in here and say, this game is a surprise and it's actually way better than you thought. It's great. I love it. But instead I have to come here and be yeah, this thing these people have been passionately working on for years is an utter disaster and they should be embarrassed. It doesn't feel good. But for some of these bigger creators to just so casually tear apart a company because they screwed it up. I mean, the comparable thing would be if I made that big Gollum video tearing it a new one, and then it came out that the only reason it was buggy for me is because I didn't read the email that sent the review code with it that said, make sure to do this, this, and this before you play and update to the newest version. Otherwise, you'll have bugs and it'll be horrible. Then that would be comparable to this. I intentionally and knowingly failed. I guess the direct comparison would be if I read the email, understood that I was playing the game incorrectly or that I didn't update the game and it wasn't going to perform properly, and then I still put the negative review out anyways. That would be the comparable thing to this, because that's what they did. They knew that it wasn't compatible with the 4090 and still put the video out, potentially destroying a company that's brand new. It's just baffling to me. It's so unprofessional. It's horrible.
And it'd be based on invalid testing and presentation. One of the company founders posted below the video and stated this, quote, "We love LTT, but it was difficult to watch their criticisms when pretty much every design issue that Linus raised was done for a reason which was all explained to Adam weeks ago, none of which, I guess, was fed back to Linus. We also sent a full instruction manual that seemingly wasn't used. I think there's definitely been a major communication breakdown along the video pipeline. We assumed we'd have a chance to answer any problems that were raised and explain them before it being publicly misrepresented." LMG faced some...
Dude, for real. And you look at the comparison, 3.7 likes, or 1,000 likes, to be clear, 3.7 thousand likes. Not bad. The video probably did over 1 million, 2 million views or something, because Linus is huge. How many people are actually going to watch that video and then go and see the correction?
Controversy from its community, at which point it replied on the following WAN show, doubling down despite a complete lack of accurate or even useful testing.
Nothing would have changed. Nothing that obeys the laws of physics would have changed the conclusion.
That statement is already a reckless and problematic doubling down, considering the elimination of any possibility to change the conclusion, including a 20-degree reduction, which should change the conclusion.
Yeah, dude, for real, 20 degrees CC reduction.
All of this is ethically unacceptable. They like to brand their short circuit stuff as unboxings, or in other words, not reviews. But it's disingenuous to hide behind that whenever there's a mistake. This magnitude of error is what the mouse, or in the case of the water block, the block is marketed on, which is either glide or thermals. And to screw the strongest marketing point through such an egregious error as not taking the tape off of the product and still leaving the video up, even while processing a cut, is callous to the impact that those choices have on these companies. Linus Media Group is massive. That has to be treated responsibly. There are correct actions. It should result in some...
Yeah, they were offered $100 million.
Some sort of immediate trigger, like a removal of the video with a follow-up saying, we did it again, here's the new results. What's even more disturbing, though, is the community response every time someone has a criticism that's valid. Like when the community beat down Hardware Unboxed for voicing their concerns of LTT's testing accuracies issues, which, while not completely tactful, yes, were valid. Then you look at the recent comments, though, like this, quote, if a professional mouse reviewer couldn't figure it out,
what's your job? I'm a professional mouse reviewer. It's insane. It's insane. I mean, all of this really comes back to rushing videos for one, and two, a lack of professionalism on the part of Linus and the managers and the supervisors and stuff. That review, even though the mouse unboxing went out, they should have unlisted the video or privated it while they did a YouTube cut, which can take like 24 hours to process, which cuts out that portion of the video describing the issue on the foot of the mouse because they didn't take the freaking tape off. And then they should republicize it and send it back out and then apologize profusely to the brand and blah, blah, blah. That's like best case scenario. Maybe even do a dedicated video apology and explanation for it. But instead, they just don't bother with any of that. And this is all compounded by something else that I mentioned at the top. Madison, if you don't know her, she was in early videos, like maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. She won a competition to get a PC built for her by Linus, and she was in the video with him. And their chemistry was so hilarious. She was just roasting him the whole time, and it was really, really funny. And so people started joking, you need to hire her. She's great. Hire her. It's just, it was funny. And so they announced that they did. And after just like a few months, I think it was a few months, I don't know if she says exactly how long, but she ended up leaving because the work environment was so crazy and toxic and just terrible that it wasn't good for her mental health. So like I said at the top, I've followed Madison or Soup for a while. She does like a bunch of streams where she'll do like hobbyist stuff where she'll go in and paint stuff or create little decorations and stuff. So if you're into D&D or Warhammer or something, there's a lot of cool stuff that she does. But she was, she describes how she never made any statements publicly because she thought she had signed an NDA. Doesn't look like she actually did, which is why she's coming out now. She says, my time at LTT brought my mental health to an all-time low. You could talk to anyone who was around me during my employment and they would confirm it. I would not have recommended anyone I knew to work there, especially with my experience as a woman in the office. I was constantly belittled by certain members of upper management. My work was called dog shit and I was called incompetent. When I would reach out to managers to try and get help with these situations, I would be told to put on my big girl pants and be more assertive. Wow. It doesn't matter if you think I am or am not stupid. This behavior is not appropriate. After enough complaints from me, I was pulled into a meeting. In that meeting, the writer's room was pointed to, and I was asked, do you think any of these people would have a hard time getting a job? I said no. Keep in mind, this was only about a month into me working there. I was then pointed to and asked, what about you? I was scared. I remember asking, are you going to fire me? And I was laughed at and told to stop being so pessimistic, as if my job and ability hadn't just been vaguely threatened. I was then asked to agree to a verbal no drama contract, which sounds super professional, like Jesus. The verbal part is very important, of course. Let's see. I realized at this moment that I wasn't considered part of the team. I was now a threat because I was putting up a fuss. Yeah, I mean, now she's coming out and she's causing problems, so they're upset about it and they're gonna drag their feet, and you know, she's now a problem because she's expressing discomfort. And so they go into all of this. They describe she describes like all of these frustrations and things she had with the company. After it was publicly announced by Linus that he was hiring me without my knowledge or consent to that situation, and also before I was even offered the job or shown the salary. Before she flew and moved to Vancouver from Arizona, she was given one basically handbook, contract, set of agreements and things that she agreed to, and then when she actually moved and arrived in Vancouver to start work, she was greeted with a different agreement and things were different. Basically, they had swapped out terms of her employment without notifying her after she had moved and given up her visa and all this, so she had no choice but to go along with it. Work from home was a whole issue. If you took 3 minutes to answer a personal email, you could get in trouble. Happened to me. There's a system of micromanaging and a level of distrust because the amount of content they push daily is so insane. No one gets a break. I remember getting told off for taking my sick days, as in the days you're entitled to when you're freaking sick. This no days off grind set culminated in the real moment I realized I had to leave. This is the insane bit. I purposely cut my leg open so bad I would have to go to the ER to get it stapled back together. It was genuinely the only way in my mind to take a day off without being harassed for a reason why. I had spoken to managers about how I was struggling and how the workload was too much for one person, but I was belittled and told you just have bad time management skills. I mean, if anything in your life ever pushes you to cut your leg open so that you can avoid something X, whatever it is, you're in pretty deep. Like that's pretty terrible. Like that's ridiculous. I remember, I mean, when she's saying that this put her into a mental situation that, you know, her mental health was at the very bottom it ever has been. I believe it. If you're gonna cut your leg open to get out of going into work, like I can understand that. I would stress that that's not something you should do. And hopefully you never get pushed to that point, but I hope she has found help since to not harm herself to get out of something like that, because that's pretty horrible. But she continued. I mean, this, if you want to go read through this whole thread, it's a lot. She describes that when she finally said she wanted to leave, that they said they would announce it on the WAN show, but she said only announce it on the WAN show if you tell everybody I quit and not that I was fired. But because of that, they never announced it on the WAN show. She just stopped appearing and stuff and disappeared, which was really, really weird. The day I handed in my notice was when somebody who constantly overstepped me, misled what I was working on and who I was, said to me, quote, "I think the reason you try to be funny is because you lack any other skills." They smiled and then walked away. I quit 15 minutes later. I can understand that. It just sounds like a really high intensity, extremely stressful environment. That certainly is not for everybody, but that can work when you are the person at the very, very top and you're the one pulling the long days, like Linus. If he wants to work like that, more power to him. I've had grind sessions where I grind out like crazy for videos we do, but that's me. Like if I have employees, I should not be holding them to that same standard or expectation. I don't think that's fair. So yeah, I just think like all of this is just compounded and compounded and compounded time and time again, and we're running out of time on this segment. But beyond this, Linus apologized for his initial response to all of this. I wanted to watch the whole thing, but I think we're running out of time before the podcast. Mr. Joraptor's in here, so we're just running out of time there. And then but I encourage everybody to go watch it yourself, go see it yourself. All I think they really need to do to dig themselves out of this is to come out and say, listen, we take these allegations seriously. We're going to hire an external party to do a formal review of workplace conditions with HR and everything. And then we're also going to be stepping back our production schedules to give our employees more time to focus on quality instead of quantity, and to prioritize a healthy mental health balance for our employees so that they're not so stretched thin. And honestly, I think they're going to see more support from their community and much better videos that are going to perform better. That, I mean, I'm a firm believer that happy workers do better work. I just firmly believe that. So, you know, there's been times where I've told Jacob, like, hey, no, we're not going to do a video on Friday. Just take a break because we did 2 reviews back to back. You've been working like crazy. Take a break. Go like out to the bar or something. Just go relax. Do something fun. I just think it's important to have a healthy work-life balance. Certainly. Their subreddit's tearing them apart. To be honest, I feel like they need a massive overhaul. Part of it is that it's Gamers Nexus that came out and said all of this. If it was anybody else, like Tom's Hardware or anything, I don't think it would have been this big. But Gamers Nexus has a very sterling reputation, and they do not just call out people for no reason. So I think that that's key. He took my thing. Red flag.